The town of Greenbank woke slowly, wrapped in a thin veil of morning fog and the chill of early spring. It was March 2021, and the road still carried the memory of winter. Frost clung to the edges of windows, and the grass by the sidewalk sparkled with dew that hadn't yet turned to steam. On the corner of Harper Road, the school bus stop looked as it always did, quiet, familiar, slightly leaning from years of wind and rain. The wooden bench creaked softly when it was touched by weight or wind. Jason arrived first, as he usually did. He was a sixth grader, tall for his age, with a worn-out backpack and a habit of coming 10 minutes early. He liked the silence before the others showed up. But that morning, something was different. He stepped onto the sidewalk and stopped. His eyes locked on the bench ahead. Something was already there. A puppy, a young German shepherd, no more than 6 months old, sat motionless on the far end of the bench. His paws were large and unbalanced for his frame, and his ears, though upright, tipped slightly under their own weight. His coat was damp, brushed with light brown and gray, and his eyes, wide and unwavering, stared down the road as if waiting for something that hadn't come. He didn't flinch. He didn't bark. He didn't move. Around his neck was a worn leather collar, slightly cracked from use. Tied to it with fraying twine was a folded piece of paper, soggy from the morning mist, edges curled, corners soft. Jason didn't touch it. He didn't need to. The presence of the note felt heavy, like something private, like something sacred. Instead, he sat beside the puppy. Not close, just enough to let the space between them become a kind of recognition. The puppy turned slightly but didn't shift his gaze. He seemed calm, in a way that didn't match his age. Not like a dog that had been lost, more like one who had been left, quietly, carefully, like someone had told him to wait. The minutes passed. A breeze carried the distant sound of tires. A car door slammed somewhere down the block. Jason stayed where he was, backpack still slung over one shoulder, hands in his jacket pockets. The puppy blinked slowly, then lowered his head slightly, resting it on the wooden slat of the bench. When the school bus finally turned the corner, headlights cutting through the fog, Jason stood without a word. He didn't say anything to the driver. He didn't explain. He just stepped aside and looked back at the dog, as if asking permission to leave. The puppy didn't move. He simply kept watching the road, waiting. The first adult to approach was the school bus driver, a man in his late 50s who had seen his share of forgotten backpacks and scraped knees. But never anything like this. He stepped off the bus slowly, cautious not to startle the puppy. The dog didn't move. He sat still, watching him, as if waiting for something familiar. A few minutes later, the teacher who happened to be driving by pulled over and joined the driver. She knelt in front of the bench, speaking softly, more out of instinct than expectation. The puppy allowed them to untie the note. He didn't flinch or pull back when the string was unknotted from his collar. When the woman gently coaxed him into the back seat of her car, he followed without hesitation. There was no panic, no resistance, just quiet acceptance. As if he understood that this was part of the plan. The note was written on a sheet of lined notebook paper, slightly smudged from the damp air, but still legible. The handwriting was unmistakably a child's. Crooked letters, uneven spacing, a few misspelled words that had been crossed out and rewritten, but the message was clear. His name is Spencer. Please don't leave him. He knows how to wait. He's my best friend. Mom said we don't have a choice. But I believe someone will find him, someone kind. No one spoke at first. The teacher read the note again, more slowly the second time, as if each word needed to be absorbed more fully. The bus driver turned away, clearing his throat. The silence grew heavy until someone whispered, "Poor kid," and someone else wiped at their eyes. Eventually, the teacher folded the paper and placed it gently in her coat pocket. Another adult took out their phone and snapped a photo, not of the puppy, but of the note resting against the collar. News of the discovery traveled quickly. Within hours, the local rescue shelter received calls. By midday, Spencer had arrived at a small veterinary clinic near town. The vet, a woman with calm hands and a low voice, examined him carefully. He was underweight, but not dangerously so. No broken bones, no fresh wounds. His coat was clean, his ears healthy, his nails trimmed neatly. He had clearly been cared for, right up until the moment he was left behind. Everyone at the clinic noticed it. This wasn't a stray pulled from a ditch or a pup born in the wild. This was a dog who had known love. Someone had held him, bathed him, talked to him. Someone had said goodbye. As evening fell, the shelter posted a photo online. Spencer sitting in a blanket-lined crate, ears tilted slightly, eyes looking straight ahead. They didn't include the note in the caption, just a single line. Found at a bus stop, waiting. The post was shared hundreds of times in the first few hours. Comments flooded in. Offers to adopt, messages from people trying to guess who the child was. Volunteers asked if they could come read to him. No one could explain why this particular story struck such a deep chord. Maybe it was the quiet of it, the restraint, the belief tucked inside a child's plea that someone kind would come. But Spencer didn't seem interested in the noise. He slept lightly that night, ears twitching at every distant sound. And in the morning, he sat near the door of the kennel, eyes fixed on the horizon, still waiting. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us bring more stories that matter. Spencer was transferred from the veterinary clinic to a local shelter just outside of town, nestled behind a line of cedar trees and worn picket fences. The facility was clean and quiet, with volunteers who rotated shifts and dogs who barked mostly out of boredom rather than fear. But Spencer didn't bark. He didn't whine. He didn't even pace like some of the others did. He simply sat, pressed against the far corner of his kennel, eyes fixed on the doorway. He barely touched his food. The staff tried everything: cooked rice, warmed broth, peanut butter. Sometimes he would nibble, more out of politeness than hunger. Mostly, he waited. During daily walks, he moved willingly, his stride even, obedient. But as soon as they returned, he headed straight for the same spot near the entrance. He would lie down, rest his head between his front paws, and stare at the glass door. It was the same posture he had at the bus stop, like a passenger still hoping for their ride. The volunteers took turns sitting beside him. One brought an old radio, playing soft jazz in the background. Another read aloud from children's books, her voice warm and gentle. They gave him plush toys, but he didn't play with them. He nudged them aside and curled up near the wall, back to the room, eyes always drifting toward the entrance, like he believed someone would walk through it if he watched long enough. Meanwhile, the note, the one written in that uneven, fragile handwriting, began to circulate online. The shelter posted it along with a photograph of Spencer in his kennel. People shared it across social media platforms. Local news ran a quiet segment, viewers called in. Some offered homes, others shared guesses. The words, "He knows how to wait," struck something deep in people, something unspoken and familiar. Volunteers started searching. They spoke with teachers in nearby schools, hoping someone would recognize the handwriting. They went door to door around Harper Road, asking if anyone knew a family who had recently moved or disappeared. A few neighbors recalled seeing a woman with a child and a dog months ago, but no one remembered names. One woman thought they might have lived in the old rental near the woods, but by the time anyone checked, the house stood empty. Locks broken, the mailbox filled with unread letters. The clues led nowhere. Some believed the family had left in a hurry, perhaps evicted, perhaps fleeing something no one could name. Others whispered theories of hardship, of domestic unrest, of lives lived too close to the edge to leave a trace behind. The police took a report, but there was little to go on. No license plate, no last name, no witnesses. Just a note tied to a collar and a dog who would not speak. Through it all, Spencer remained silent. He didn't cry at night. He didn't flinch from touch. But there was a quiet weight to him, the kind that made people lower their voices when they walked past, as if his sadness asked for silence, as if his hope required it. The staff at the shelter began referring to his kennel as the house without a door. Not because he was trapped, but because something was missing. Something that once opened outward, letting light in, had vanished, and Spencer somehow knew. He was not lost. He had not run away. He had been sent. And now, all he knew how to do was wait. 2 weeks passed since Spencer had been brought to the shelter. Slowly, quietly, something in him began to shift. His appetite returned, steady and unforced. He started to wag his tail when the volunteers entered his kennel. During walks in the yard, he paused to sniff the air, noticed birds in the trees, watched other dogs play from a distance. It wasn't joy yet, but it was the beginning of movement, of life loosening its hold on waiting. Still, every evening as the light dimmed, Spencer returned to the same place by the door. He sat, ears tilted, eyes fixed beyond the fence, watching the road that curved past the shelter and disappeared into the trees. He waited not with urgency, but with faith. It was part of him now, this quiet hope. That Friday afternoon, a woman named Marie arrived at the shelter with her daughter, Ellie. The staff had explained Spencer's story on the phone. They told her about the note, the bus stop, the failed search for the child who had left him behind. But Marie didn't come because of the story. She came because of Ellie. Ellie was 8 years old and hadn't spoken in 6 months, not since the accident that had taken her father. Marie no longer tried to coax words from her. She had learned instead to wait, to watch, to offer presence in place of pressure. When Ellie had first seen the photograph of Spencer on the shelter's website, his quiet posture, his eyes that didn't seek the camera, she had pointed to the screen and simply said, "He's alone, like me." They entered the shelter quietly. Ellie clutched a worn notebook against her chest. Marie signed the visitor form, and a volunteer led them down the corridor, lined with kennels. Dogs barked and stirred, some pressed against the gates, some pacing with excitement, but Spencer remained still. He stood up slowly when he saw them, not with energy, but with attention. He didn't run forward. He didn't hesitate either. He walked to the front of the enclosure and sat down, eyes fixed on Ellie. She stopped just short of the bars. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Ellie stepped closer, the notebook still pressed against her. Spencer tilted his head and slowly lowered himself onto the floor. The volunteer unlatched the gate. Marie entered first, crouching, her movements slow and open. Spencer glanced at her, then back at Ellie. It was not a decision. It was recognition. Ellie stepped in, knelt down a foot away from him, and placed the notebook on the floor. Then she reached out with one hand, palm up, resting it lightly on his back. Spencer didn't flinch. He didn't move away. He leaned in. It was a gesture so subtle it could have been missed, but Marie saw it. The way his head dipped, the way Ellie's posture softened. No words passed between them. None were needed. That afternoon they sat together for over 20 minutes in the stillness of the kennel. Other families came and went. Staff moved down the hall with clipboards and leashes, but inside that enclosure, nothing stirred except two hearts learning to breathe beside each other. By the end of the visit, Ellie hadn't spoken again, but when Marie asked if she wanted to come back tomorrow, Ellie nodded. That night, Spencer returned to his spot by the door. But this time, he didn't face the road. He turned inward and rested his head on his paws, and for the first time, he slept through until morning. They brought him home on a Saturday afternoon, just as the wind shifted and the clouds began to clear. The house was small but warm, a single-story home with creaking floors and shelves filled with books and framed photographs. Spencer stepped inside without hesitation, pausing only once in the doorway as if memorizing the threshold. That first evening, he remained by the front door. He lay with his paws crossed, eyes open, ears twitching at every sound. Not restless, just alert. He watched the hallway, the shadows, the way Ellie moved from room to room in silence. When she went to bed, he stayed near the entrance, as if unsure whether he was truly meant to belong. On the second night, Spencer followed Ellie to her room. She didn't ask. He didn't wait for permission. He lay near the edge of the bed, curled against the frame. Ellie didn't reach for him, but she didn't ask him to leave. She slept through the night without waking. On the third night, Marie heard a voice she hadn't heard in 6 months. It came quietly through the hallway, wrapped in the hush of blankets and twilight. One word, simple. Here. It was not said with urgency or fear. It was a confirmation, a statement, a beginning, and it was enough. From that point forward, Spencer was more than a dog. He was part of the rhythm of the house. He woke before the others, sat at the window with the morning light on his fur, scanning the quiet street as if counting the world back into place. He waited by the door when Ellie dressed for school and rode with Marie to drop her off. He sat at the gate at pickup time, still as a statue, eyes fixed until Ellie returned. He didn't bark unless there was reason. He didn't beg for attention. He moved through the house like a presence more than a pet. Watching, waiting, holding space. He seemed to understand that stillness could be a kind of offering. Marie noticed small changes. Ellie hummed when she brushed Spencer's coat. She began drawing again, simple sketches, first of trees, then of dogs. Her teachers mentioned she had started participating in class, speaking softly but clearly. They didn't press her, they just let her grow. Spencer became the quiet center of it all. When Ellie read aloud, he listened. When Marie cried late at night in the kitchen, he lay nearby, eyes half closed, ears forward. He carried no noise but held all the noise they couldn't say. Sometimes when they walked together, just the three of them, Marie would glance down and see how close Spencer stayed to Ellie's side. Never pulling, never leading, just aligned. Like a shadow that chose to stay. Like someone who had once waited and now understood the value of never being left behind again. In a world full of dogs, Spencer wasn't just another rescue. He wasn't just saved. He was sent. Spring came gently to Greenbank. The snow melted from the ditches, and small shoots of grass returned to the roadside like shy guests. Trees stirred in the wind again, and the sky softened from cold gray to something almost warm. The air carried the promise of something new, though it didn't announce itself loudly. Ellie had changed, too, not in sudden ways, but in the steady unfolding that follows a long silence. She laughed now sometimes. She asked questions again. She stopped looking behind her when she walked and began looking ahead, but more than anything, she had started to write. One afternoon, without telling anyone, she took out a piece of lined school paper, the same kind that had once carried a message tied around a dog's neck. She used the same kind of pencil. Her handwriting was firmer now, but it held the same shape, the same slow care. She wrote, "We found him. He doesn't wait anymore. He knows he's loved. Thank you, whoever you are." She didn't explain. She didn't sign it. Marie found her folding the paper and tucking it into an old envelope. No stamp, no name. Ellie simply asked if they could stop by the bus stop on Harper Road that afternoon. When they got there, she stepped out, crossed the grass without hesitation, and placed the envelope gently on the bench, just beneath the slat where Spencer had once sat. There was no ceremony, no photo, just the wind in the trees and the quiet of a message returned. Marie asked nothing. She sat with Ellie for a while, and then they drove home. The letter remained there, unclaimed. Some days it was wet from morning dew, other days it fluttered in the breeze but never blew away. Maybe someone would find it. Maybe not. That wasn't the point. The point was that someone had once believed the world might hold enough kindness to catch what they had, to let go. And someone else, later, answered that hope not with words, but with presence. Spencer didn't approach the bench. He stayed in the car, head resting on the window, eyes watching the road ahead. He no longer waited in doorways. He no longer needed to. Sometimes the most important thing in life is not knowing where your home is, but knowing who you're waiting for. And trusting, against all odds, that love might still find its way through the silence.